requires me in some ways to go deep in that meditation and to be open to the masters. It's wonderful. It's taken the mind out of it because there's no preparation. So it's we just all pray that they use me in a good way this morning. So we'll start by seeing if there are any questions in the room, and if not, then we'll go to some questions that have already been sent in by people, and maybe more will be sent in. If you're, and James has a handheld microphone, which we'd like you to use so that the question can be recorded. And if you're watching online, please go ahead and write any questions that you have in the chat box. And just to say to you, because it comes up each time, if you're watching online, we don't necessarily say who the question is from. So if you'd like some anonymity, you have it. You don't have it here, obviously. So does anybody here have a question? I think, James, we're going to need to close this door. I'm sorry. That will, before we start, yeah. Good, okay. That noise is very loud, and they do a lot of that work on a Saturday. I don't know why that is always. Does anybody have a question? Evelyn, very good.
I'm going to try to ask in a concise way. Sometimes I can see my tapasya. I can see the path that I'm on, or how I'm working, or...
Evelyn, I need to ask you to speak up.
Just okay, how about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Even it gets a little muffled through the microphone a little bit. Go
Sure.
ahead and start over, Annie.
Okay.
I know you were going to try and be concise, that I heard, but don't worry about that. Yeah.
It's almost, I'm at a place where I can almost see in front of me my tapasya, the work, like the lifestyle. And I'm doing good work there, right? But I know I'm supposed to be over here. Like I'm supposed to, I feel like I'm at a crossroad, I guess, where I can see in front of me the way I'm working, the way I'm serving, the way I'm living my life, or the responsibilities that I have, right? Whether it's family or work. And that's okay. And I know I'm supposed to start shifting it to serve in a different way. And I can't seem to figure out how to get from here to here. Like, and I was speaking to my god sister. She's on a different path, but we have many similarities. And she said, why can't we just take a leap? And why weren't we just born right in the midst of the path where that's supposed to be on, so we can be a little further ahead? And I'm like, that would be lovely. But that's my question. Like, I can see what I'm doing, and I know I want to get here, and I don't know how because of the work or the family responsibilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't in any way mean to belittle or demean or minimize what you're going through. But the truth is that what you're talking about is why and how is it that Maya has such a hold on me? And, again, that is the whole of the path. It's precisely why we were born. This lifetime is exactly about, for you, it's true for all of us, but I can answer you, figuring out how do I get from here where I know you're doing good work. I know that. It's not like what you're doing is bad. This is why Swamiji put that line in the Festival of Light, something that we read every Sunday here, where he says, Jesus appeared to the great master, Babaji. The lights on the high altar of my church, he said, are growing dim. The high altar, though still lit by lower altars of good works, but the noble taper of inner communion burns low and is ill attended. You know, sometimes we say these lines every week, or we hear them every day, and they start just, we don't tune in the way we can tune in. And that is a very meaningful line, because that leap from lower altars of good works, which looks so good, we're serving, we're loving, our family needs us, our work needs us, and you're doing such great work as a therapist in the way that you work. But the truth is, everything, when compared to dedicating this life to God, means to finding that divine within us, the noble taper of inner communion with the Lord, that connection from our heart chakra up to the point between the eyebrows, that energy flowing is what you're calling over here. I see it. How do I bring it here? And it's tricky, of course it's tricky. This is how Maya holds us. Recently, I've been tuned into, in a deeper way than ever, about just how good Maya is at what it does. And I can't remember where I just said this. It might have been at Sunday service last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever I last gave Sunday service. This idea that Maya, listening to Paramhansa Yogananda, who says, Maya, that which pulls us away from knowing the realization of the divine. This is self-realization. It's our whole path. It's what he called it, realizing the higher self. But that which keeps pulling us out and away is also a force, a part of the divine. It's active, it's focused, it's conscious, it's literally coming at us to fool us. Yogananda said this. He said it's really good at what it does because it's so strong. It's a piece. Of course it is. Everything is of God himself. I'm going to make this all make more sense to you in a moment. But you're being tugged on, like we all are, by a force that is perfectly good at helping us believe that everything else that we feel we need to do is separate from God, is what we're intended to do, is you can fill in all of those words. So here's what I would say. It is very, very hard as a human being to leave that which we feel called upon as our responsibilities in the world. If you're a parent, you can't decide not to parent because you want to sit and meditate 8 hours a day, which of course most of us couldn't do anyway. If your spouse is ill, you can't just walk away from that at a certain, that's adharmic. That's not the point. The point is, how do we move closer and closer and closer to knowing? Self-realization is the knowing in every part of body, mind, and soul. Then the definition goes on. But how do we move closer to knowing that it is always God serving God? It's not you with your family. As long as it's you with your family, it's other. If you can practice getting to that place of moving away from I very hard, and moving away from mother out there, father out there, work out there. But notice every single thing that God is doing through this channel as serving God in the other channel. I promise you it's tricky. It is not easy. For a million different reasons, we get fooled. But it's a practice. And so one does not need to leave that life. You're not going to leave your mother and your siblings and your cousins. You were born into loving them. You were born into a culture where that is so strong, and we all have our stories. So if we can all go through that transformation, where it's not about leaving anything, but about discovering the divine in everything, actually, it's an easier path than trying to turn our backs on that which is our dharma in this life. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to add one sentence because I said it for the whole world to hear before. When at Spiritual Renewal Week, you may or may not have seen that talk. But I'm living this so intensely with my partner, who everybody in the Ananda world knows has been so sick. And I'll add a little note of intrigue. For the first time in 3 years, he's getting better. He's getting noticeably better. We never knew what was wrong, and I have no idea why it's moving in this direction. But last night when I was meditating, this thought or inspiration came to me that because for 9 months, every time I look at him, I talk to Master in my mind. Master, you're so grumpy today. Master, would you like to join me for dinner? Master, please turn your music down. Master, can you work on getting the headphones connected to the television so you can listen soundlessly? Master, how about if we go for a little walk right now? Start it with 1 minute of walking. Now, Master and I are walking 15 minutes together every day. It is really hard because Master does get grumpy in that form. He does get mean in certain forms. He does get jealous or demanding. But if it's all Master, we love him so much that honestly, if I was trying to tell you I was there 100% of the time, I'd be lying and you'd know it. But we never make progress if we're not trying. And I feel that joy of serving God more and more. And I wonder, could that be why Barry's getting better? Because he's being realized as something divine. Now, I don't want to just keep that with Barry. None of us would. This is how we need to look at each other every moment. Look, God just walked in this costume of Evelyn or Shankari or Mulani or whoever. God, God, God. Do we have another question here? Or is it?
Okay, there we go. Good. I read in the Gospel of Matthew that Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When I'm having a hard time, I have only asked God for strength, but sometimes I am so tired that I don't want strength. I don't want to try to keep keeping on. I only want the rest from weariness and burdens that Jesus says we gain by taking his yoke. How do I turn my troubles over to God? How do I find rest? By taking his yoke. And what is his yoke?
That's a very beautiful reading from Matthew. That is so beautiful. You know, usually because we have this every Sunday, Jesus just brought tears to these eyes. We read a reading from the Bible and a reading from the Gita that in essence is saying the same thing, but the feeling in the Bible is so different than the feeling in the Gita. And of course, we've spoken many, many times. We always talk about why that's true. We talk about yugas. We talk about how Jesus had to use a different language 2,300 years ago, really in the deepest part of Kali Yuga. The Yuga, those thousands of years where delusion is the greatest and people are blinded and there's no subtlety or sensitivity in their vibrational selves, their spirit, their soul. So you can't speak to them in that language. You have to speak to them in a tougher, more down-to-earth kind of way, and Jesus did. And he used, as we know, parables all the time because he was speaking to masses, but he would often say, for those who have ears to hear. So if you could understand his parables or his language, you became one who could absorb, know, realize the beautiful teachings that he brought. But there were few. I mean, it was Jesus Christ, and he had 12 disciples who were following him. He, of course, had more followers, but 12. And we know they didn't even do such a great job, all of them. One of them betrayed him. I mean, it's complicated. This spiritual path is very, very hard. So who's ever asking that question, please know that you're not alone. God did not make this easy on us. Evelyn alluded to that when she said a cousin or a friend said, why didn't God just help us be born remembering everything? And it's a complicated question and probably not a good question because, as Buddha said, the mind that asked that question could never understand the answer, meaning we cannot ever know the answer to that question until we are with God. Then we have all the answers to all the questions we ever had. But guess what? We don't care anymore. We realize how silly they were. Just the mind doing its thing. I'm not saying to you that your question was silly. I mean, none of these questions are silly, but we're all silly in a way. So what I was saying when I was talking about the difference between the Bible and the Gita is that I always find Krishna is so reassuring. Every passage that we read on Sundays, Krishna is sort of saying, don't worry about anything. I'm right here. I'm going to hold you. And in the end, no matter what happens, if you fail and fail and fail, just bring me your failures. He's saying, in essence, what Jesus is saying so sweetly in this passage, which I find a little more unusual for Jesus, but he's saying, bring me your failures. He's saying, you don't have to struggle out there alone. when it gets too hard for you, okay, Lakshmi's coming, it means there must be a problem, something. I didn't mean that the way it sounds. She comes often when there's no problem, but when it has to do with sound and me speaking here. But Jesus is saying, don't feel like you're alone. You're never alone. Even if you're burdened with that yoke that you have to carry, which is part of me, he's saying. It's part of the divine. It's the answer I just was giving to Evelyn. Nothing exists that is separate from God. It's impossible. Everything, every thought, every physical thing, every feeling has been made manifest from that place of super consciousness, from that which is behind, not just what has been manifested, but behind every thought, that which exists beyond any of it, behind any of it. We call it the causal plane, but it doesn't matter what we call it. Everything came from there. So whether it's the love of your life or an abusive partner, whether it's a perfect child or the most troubled child in the world, whether it's a beautiful mansion or a house that's being swept away by a flood, we could go on and on. It's all part of God. And we suffer. We're human. We're human. The nature of the human condition is that we're not yet perfect in our realization. So we will suffer. It's hard, and it doesn't serve us to keep contemplating, why did it have to be hard? Why did it have to be hard? It serves us to be, as Swamiji said, solution-oriented. What do I do? How do I hold that which is challenging? What do I do with that energy? Because it's all pure energy. And Jesus is saying, just come and be with me. You can even bring me all of that trouble, which is right now unbearable for you. And you, I forget all of the words now, but lay down with me, even with the yoke, even with that heavy burden. And the question of how do I do that, the answer, I should say, really is, it's very simple. But as with so many things in life, so many things that are ultimately simple, but they're not easy. It's not easy getting there. So I want to say to you, go to your altar and remember that, hold on for just 1 minute, that's annoying me. Okay, that which annoyed her 10 minutes ago finally got to me. You know, I had an experience once that I know many of you have heard, but it was an extraordinary, as in extraordinary, so always worth sharing again. When I was up at the meditation retreat and had gone into Babaji's cave that's been recreated up at the retreat to meditate. And I had an experience of feeling the masters coming in behind me. And I just asked for Kleenex. Excuse me for 1 moment. And I didn't hear them, but what they delivered to me in a way that's very hard to put into words, but I'll bet all of you know it. You just suddenly know something and you know it didn't come from your thoughts. They said, we are about to ask a lot of you, which really, honestly, nearly stopped my heart because I was already really doing a lot in the world. And I thought, now you're telling me you're about to ask a lot of me? They said, but if you get confused and forget who's doing it, who's actually doing it, find the nearest altar and we will remind you. In other words, it's God acting through you. It was an extraordinary experience, an amazing and perfect, really, appearance of the divine in my life. And it took me 2 years because I came back from that, whatever I was doing there, seclusion retreat, I don't know. And a lot unfolded, all here, all at Ananda. But they were right, it was a lot. And many times I would find myself seeking an altar. And about 2 years later, I just burst out laughing when I realized that where is the nearest altar, which is what they said to me, find the nearest altar. And I realized they're talking about my heart chakra. Find us there and you will know the truth. And they've never failed me when I remember to Take two. When I remember to pray, to go deep, to take that question or that concern or that fear or that heaviness, that yoke into my heart, into a meditation. Honestly, it does help for us mere mortals to find a beautiful altar. That's part of why we all need to have an altar at home. We have many altars here. Find an altar. And of course, there are times where you can't do that. Find the nearest altar, and we will remind you. And what it means is they come. They remind us we're right here. We've never gone anywhere. You went, you left, you thought you had to do that. You actually believed for 2 years that you needed to be a full-time caregiver, a full-time spiritual director, a part-time physician. You thought you were doing it all. Of course you're exhausted. Of course it weighs you down. You can't do that, but I can, God says. I can do anything. So Jesus is telling us, use me, remember me, come to me, think of me, pray to me. And just as Krishna says in the end of that, and if in this thy faint heart fails, he says, so beautiful, bring me your failures. So the hard part is giving it up, is letting it go for a while. Because as hard as this is for us to know or believe, part of the human condition is the way that we're drawn to pain and to suffering. We just are. It's a part of us. I used to say to patients very often, do you want to be well? Of course I do. They would say, why would I be here otherwise? I said, if you want to be well, I think I can help you. But I will tell you, in many instances, when they started feeling well. It scared them. It scared them. And I understand. I have been there myself. And they would, in a very clear to me way, start holding on to their illness again. Because there's a lot of safety when we're less than all of who we can be. We get to be taken care of. We get to be little. We get to have our feelings hurt. We get to try and justify that. That's all ego. And the ego is back there saying, yeah, look, I got them again. But it is part of the human condition. So it's very, very challenging to genuinely lay down the yoke. But it's a goal, and the whole spiritual path is directional. We're just on it. We just keep that light right here as often as we can, and we practice, literally practice laying down. Open your heart. Offer it to God. God, I don't want this. It's too much for me. Honestly, I feel that. I can't do this. Please take it. You take it. You created it to begin with. It was never really mine. And it's a practice, just like I was saying about seeing God in everything and everyone. And will we get it perfect in this life? Well, Master says we've already lived 10 million lives. Maybe this is it for some of you. Or maybe there's 10 million and one at least. I don't know. But I do know this. When we leave this body at the end of this life, every bit of spiritual progress that we've made, Master's told us this, his words, not mine, we keep. Nothing happens to it. And when we're born again, we actually do come back. Oh, we have to live through stuff. Master himself said taking on a human body was like putting ourselves in a heavy winter coat on a hot day. It feels confining, it feels terrible. And we live with delusion again. But we are wiser. And we might find our way onto our spiritual paths sooner in that life. We might be able to stay longer, whatever. We don't lose this. We'll never lose it. So I love that you found that reading from Jesus, and I can imagine that it came to you in some moment of great suffering, and it doesn't make sense to our heads. It's not rational. Jesus and other avatars are not speaking to our minds. They're not speaking to our rational selves. They don't see us that way. They see us as beings of pure light and pure love. So he was speaking to your heart, to your soul nature. Read that reading from Matthew over and over. I would say read it every day. And as you read it, keep your heart open. Don't let it get caught in that mind that wants to keep saying, but what does that mean? What does this mean? The answer is not in the rational meaning. The answer is in that offer of such pure love. I will take your burden. I will carry you. And can you read me the beginning of that reading again?
Of the quote?
From Matthew.
Yes. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest.
And this is what he's saying. And the rest, it's not taking a nap. It's not even if you physically lie down to try, because if you lay down on your back, it does open your heart. And It allows energy to flow more easily there. The rest that he's talking about is, I will give you an experience of the love of God, and you will not be weary. You may not be able to hold it, but I will show you that. This is what it feels like to offer yourself into the divine, to forget your human experience. And this is why we meditate, because for anybody who's been meditating for a long time, or sometimes people haven't experienced their first time, it's really not about time. When we go deep in meditation, let me put it that way, we experience that. We forget. We forget the body. This is why sometimes when we're meditating, the body's going like this. Not that we're falling asleep necessarily, though sometimes we do, but we forget the body. Master said, I forget which body I'm supposed to hold up. And Swamiji, you remember, he said he used to have to help him out of 29 palms because he would forget which body he was in, so the body would just drop. That's the rest. And when it happens, it's so refreshing. It gives you energy to keep going. When we leave our bodies, if we enter a state of samadhi, that final exit, we don't keep coming back. But most of us will have a taste of that, and then we'll be back. But it really allows us to keep moving where we're headed, which is towards that noble taper of inner communion, towards living in that state of rest. So thank you for sharing that quote, that saying. It's very beautiful. Thank you. Please don't be shy about asking questions.
Okay, I've got another one here. Can you speak about the effect our astrological chart has on our lives? How much does our mindset and our will have on influencing it? And does God's will for us match our Vedic charts?
Our big,
Vedic charts.
or our Vedic charts?
Vedic charts, yeah.
Okay, sorry. There's a beautiful, beautiful chapter in Autobiography of a Yogi. Something the stars, what's Outwitting the Stars. Interesting title, isn't it? Which just came to me. Outwitting the Stars, he calls it. And it describes beautifully the whole, how astrology works with us, for us. And I don't know anything about astrology, zero. So let me just say that right at the outset here. But about a year ago, I was reading that chapter for some reason, something I was teaching, I'm sure. And I got it. And let me see if I can pull it up, because I haven't read the chapter recently enough. I wish I read it yesterday to be able to speak to this. I realized how often people say, well, in response to why they behaved a certain way, why they're feeling a certain way, why they're stuck, people refer to their chart, the time that they're in, karma, which is, of course, completely wrapped up with the astrology of it all, where how the planets are aligned in the exact instant that that soul chooses to be born. It all, and where and how that gets laid down in as our astral spine, so that it does dictate what our chakras are like in that instant. And there's no mistaking it here. We choose exactly the life that soul does, exactly the life that it will be born into in order to make spiritual progress. No matter what our lives have looked like, imagine that. Our higher self knew that that was the perfect life to make progress, if we make progress, if we keep to it, because we're already determining through every question and answer here, it's hard. So the exact circumstance at the exact moment. However, it doesn't mean that we're stuck there. And it doesn't mean that we have a certain karma that we have to live with for the rest of our lives. And how do I want to say this? Because it's something I feel deeply that is clear to me, and yet I don't feel it with any arrogance of the mind or as a human being. But I have heard many, many highly evolved people, highly evolved souls, say to me, well, it's just my karma. Like, just like that, it's just my karma. As if we have not also been given, first and last, I would say, free will. Very complicated topic. But we have been given, as human beings, free will. We always have the choice, always, always, always have the choice to make decisions in the direction of God or in the direction of staying where we are, being stuck, or worse yet, moving closer towards the darkness. And we all do this. I mean, it's not like we're horrible if we're not using our free will in every moment of this life to move towards the light, because we don't, none of us. But we're working towards that, and we want to do it more and more. So I will say that astrology has everything to do with how we come in, and everything to do with what influences, what's influencing us in every given moment of our lives. But we are not bound by it. We're born into it precisely to move and expand beyond it. I mean, precisely. The word doesn't even say it precisely enough because it's so exact. So there's no room for laziness on the path, not if we actually really want to become self-realized, not if we actually, even in this life, say, I really genuinely want to feel God's love. I want to feel God's arms around me. I want to feel the release of that burden for a while. All of that, when we're sincere about just moving in that direction, there is no room for laziness. Master said over and over, as did Swamiji, if you're not making spiritual progress, there's no standing still, then you're losing ground. And that is because the lack of bringing in energy, using our magnetism, using our will and our willpower, all of these things that we live every day on this path, and truthfully on any spiritual path that has come to us through a true teacher, because it's just what they would teach. You have to learn to use the energy that you are. Just like I was saying with healing prayers, it's real what we can do. We are pure energy. We're pure magnetism because of that. We all know that. We know it in the form of electricity, and electricity creating magnetism. That's who we are. Imagine that. This whole being. Remember, Master said there's enough energy in 1 gram of your body. 1 gram. I've often wanted to figure out, somebody else can do it. I'm not going to stop right now and do it. It's just a question of math. How many kilograms are we? How many grams is that? A lot. It's a lot for most of us. We could run the city of Chicago for a whole week. That's what he said. We have so much unused energy here, but if we turn our backs on it and forget, we call that tamas. That's being tamasic, lazy, unkempt, slovenly, not just on the physical plane, more importantly on the spiritual plane. So gathering up all of the energy that it takes to overcome karma, past tendencies, past. I'm always intrigued that Swamiji uses the word, where is it now? Past bad karma. We say, it must be in the festival somewhere because we say it every week. I'm having trouble reminding myself where it is. But that phrase, past bad karma, because I don't usually think of karma as being bad. I don't qualify it. It feels to me like opportunities to continue to grow spiritually. He must have put that word in there for a very good reason because, as we all know, Swamiji was nothing if not masterful with words. So there's no mistake there, but it always kind of stops me a little. So yes, it has everything to do with how and why we come in, but not in the sense that people often hold it like then you're stuck. Much more in the sense of this is the job that's before you. You've chosen perfectly for the opportunity to grow spiritually and realize your true self if you will find the courage, the steadfastness, the willingness, the willpower, the power, the spiritual power to just keep saying yes, yes, yes. And it's very hard. I have a lot of respect for the last question that was asked about, and saying, honestly, sometimes I just don't want to do the work. I don't want to. And, again, in the festival, I'm sorry I keep referring to it because for those of you who don't know it, you'll feel a little lost. Listen in next Sunday. But the festival is broken down into 4 stages of spiritual development. And at some point it says, and we, like that little bird, because the story of the soul is told in the form of a little bird. Swamiji himself said, when it came to me that way, I thought, a little bird? But it was a pure inspiration for him, so he followed it and he wrote it that way. And it's such a beautiful story of our lives. But it says, we, like that little bird, entered the 2nd stage of the soul's long journey away from its home in God, the stage which is called the revolt. And every Sunday, whether I'm reading it or listening to it, I think, the revolt. There's so many ways to revolt, and we're all doing it. But fortunately, God watches our heart, and he knows our intention. So I hope I answered that question for you. James, do we have more questions?
Yes. When the guru is no longer in the body as our guru, how do we know when our intuition is truth? How can we trust what we feel to be true when those messages come from within and not from direct contact with the guru?
That's a very good question that always gets asked in one way or another in every question and answer session I've ever done. But let me start by saying, you have to let go of that thought in your mind that you're not in direct touch with your guru. It honestly, this is hard for us because we're human beings. I've been given the nickname by many people of being the hugging mom because so many people know I love to hug. I love to hug and be hugged. And each hug is different, but it just communicates so much beyond words. So I'm very physical in that way, but, and first, let me say, and many of you have heard this, again, but worth repeating. Every single night, no matter where I am, every night, it's been a practice for years now, when all the meditating's done, the conversation's done, the whatever, getting settled in a new place, getting the puppy settled, whatever it is. The very last thing that I do before I fall asleep is ask Master to put his arms around me. Every night, I want him to hold me. And I'm telling you, if you develop whatever practice that works for you like that, I feel him. I feel him. And I don't think I'm any different than anybody in this room or out there. It has nothing to do with anything other than remembering to ask, because God cannot resist our heart and our love. He is love. It's the greatest form of magnetism. It's that we forget that all the time. We forget to call to ask. So I just want to say, your guru is always with you. Having said that, Master and Swamiji both talk about, in various places, what it means to have contact with the spiritual, I'm going to use the word descendants, but I want to define it because it's not like a lineage of gurus. Swamiji himself said that this lineage ended with Master. So in terms of these avatars that came, that's a whole other topic. But in terms of Swamiji having lived with Master, so a direct disciple of a true guru is very, very meaningful. That is the extraordinary blessing that we all have. Even people who are coming to Ananda right now who never met Swamiji in his body. It's funny, we just have to keep letting go of the bodies. Every single thing that is Ananda, because it's all vibrational. The tones of our voice, the words that we all choose to use. I was telling Mulini, who's joining us today for the first time, but who just, and like all beautiful stories, she came here through this, what would look like a circuitous route. She was, reading an advertisement about the farm, somehow knew she was not meant to go to Half Moon Bay today, but kept searching. Babaji came. Of course, when it's that moment, they come to us. But so I'm speaking about everything being the way Swamiji realized this vibration. It's huge. Imagine it. The shapes of buildings, the music that we constantly sing. I think, honestly, these spiritual questions answered sessions that we do are almost the only time in Ananda where we're not just flooded with music. Master's music, of course, but 80% probably Swamiji, who just had music flowing through him. The way we speak, the way we give talks, colonies, centers, literally around the world now. I mean, Ananda is so huge, all coming from one soul who dedicated himself to doing nothing but spreading his master's teachings throughout the world. And we are a part of that. We're part of that vibration. And so then those people who founded Ananda, who were with Swamiji right from the very beginning, and then many of us who came just a few years later. You know, I had very little to do exactly with Swamiji throughout all of those early years. I always went up to the village. I was always with him. I was a part of starting here. I was very much with the Atherton House. So that was before there was this, or even the center above the copy store. I mean, Ananda was unfolding and coming here. So he would come down, but for karmic reasons, I was not meant to be close with him then, like one of the people who would sit in his house with him and just hang out all the time. No, none of that came until later in his life, much later in his life, when he would find me and bring me to him in various ways. Come out for dinner, sit at my table at this event, sit right across from me. It was just like that. It was him knowing exactly when the time was, when I was ready to receive his energy. That's true for many, many people here. So we don't have our guru in the body, but we have our guru. You call and he will come. We have Swamiji. Ask Swamiji a question. Ask him, I need your help here. And he will be right there. Find somebody whose vibration, whose intuition, the feeling of them that you trust, and use them as a spiritual guide, as a spiritual teacher, somebody who you feel their attunement is such that they will seek an answer for you through the gurus and not through their own ego. And follow your own sense of that, your own intuition. And because Swamiji said the hardest thing, and of course it just makes perfect sense, on the spiritual path is knowing when our intuition is right. And I feel that it is so tricky to get completely away from the ego and know for sure that Master's guiding you. I think it's harder than many of us believe. So yes, we start following something, and I have probably heard 10,000 times in my life, at least, even from myself, by the way, with all humility, I'm saying this. No, I'm sure Master's telling me to do this. I'm sure Master's telling me. Sometimes even when I know really for sure that what they're telling me isn't accurate, it has humbled me and scared me in a way to have me try and go deeper and deeper and seek counsel if there's any doubt. I do that. On the other hand, if it's not true inspiration, if it's not really coming from the guru, but rather Satan himself just took up residence in your mind for a moment, which he does beautifully often, you take a few steps in the direction you thought you were heading, what you thought was pure inspiration, and you'll know soon enough. If you're genuinely seeking, you'll know. You know, people will, Swamiji says this. He says, look around, see, are people smiling more when they're around you? Are they saying to you, is something wrong with you? You know, are you feeling okay? Pay attention. If you were certain that was the right job, it felt right, but you get into the job and nothing's going right, maybe it wasn't really the job for you. Maybe it was more your desire than your attunement that led you there. And we just keep going like that because we will make mistakes. We will. But if we're open to guidance, more and more we realize nothing's a real mistake. We just took a little detour and we come back. We took another little detour and we just keep coming back. So we actually don't need the guru to be in the body, but our little human selves would love that. But I've asked myself many times, if Master was here, would I ever ask him for a hug? Probably not. So I'm probably closer to him because he's not in the body. But he is so with us. So just please know that. I know that for a fact. It's us that creates any distance, not him or them. They just want to be as close as we'll let them be. That's why Krishna says, bring me your failures. That's why Jesus says, come to me and take rest. They don't care what state we're in. They know exactly who we are. They know what mistakes we're going to make before we do. They're just trying to say to us over and over, just remember me. Just remember. I look up, but it's not even up. Remember God. And more, we remember we are a manifestation of that ourselves. It's closer than we think. Nearer than the near and dearer than the dear, Master says. Yeah. And the other thing that I have on my desk at home that I love that he said, when Swamiji asked him, Master, will we be able to find you after you're gone, after you've left your body? This is probably the short form answer now that I've given you the long form. He said to Master, will we be able to find you? And Master looked right at Swamiji and he said, for those who think me near, I will be near. That's a beautiful line to just remember that. For those who think me near. So you think him near, just have him right with you all the time.
When you mentioned spiritual progress, it brought to mind a talk that I had with a person who had come to, is this okay? Had come to one of the outreach programs. So he was not on the path, but he was interested in spiritual things. And he asked, how do I know if I'm making spiritual progress? That question. And I've seen that question, and I've seen the answers many places, and I have a little bit of resistance to the answers. So my question is sort of, what is the question that I really need to ask rather than, am I making spiritual progress? Because my feeling about the question as it's asked that way is my focus on me making spiritual progress, or is my focus on God?
Yeah.
And I want my focus to be on God. But at the same time, the answers that I have seen, I mean, literally written down, are things like, oh yeah, I guess I should, those things should be appearing. But if my focus is on, this is my goal, I want this to appear, it just doesn't feel like I'm getting what I really want, which is a closer relationship with God. God to flow through me without me having to think about what are the 10 things that I need to be manifesting in order to show spiritual progress. Who cares? I mean, everyone cares, but...
I think I really know what you're saying, and it's actually a good point. I think a lot depends even on how we ask that question. If we were to just say, at night before I go to bed, I put myself in the arms of God and say, help me be closer to you, help me keep coming. It's kind of different than that egoic point that you're making. And I can imagine that a lot depends on, and one could say, what's the point of even asking that question, which is what you're saying, which is the same could be the same answer to the question, why did God do this to us? because it keeps us in our mind. It keeps us thinking about things. And what you're saying, and I agree, of course, is we don't want to be intellectually figuring out the answers to those things. We simply want to be being in a way that will bring us closer to God within and without. I mean, closer, again, I keep using the word realization, but to that realization. And I actually know exactly what you're saying, and I could agree with you about that. What's the point of asking that question? But I also do understand, that mortal being wanting to just say, am I doing it? It's like when you're on a long hike that keeps going up and up and up, and you're going to go to the top. I mean, I know you've been in this situation. I've been in this situation. And often I think, what is the point of stopping and looking at the top and saying, how much further, how much further? Because first of all, and this is interesting, and it's a perfect analogy, whether you're doing a long run on a beach or you're truly climbing a mountain, you can't really see how far it is. I promise you, I used to run the beach all the time, 15, 18 miles a day. And the goal always looked closer than it was. Because, there would be these little inlets and the beach would turn a little, and it was silly. And I used to say, because I was a little bit of a Ram Dass baby, Shanti, be here now, be here now. With every step, I mean, now I would probably be saying, Om Guru, Om Guru. But when I was doing those long runs, you all know the story, before Master came, it would be here now, be in the moment. You're going to run all the way down to La Jolla, no matter what, that's where you're going. So just stay in the moment. I think it's what you're saying. Same with climbing mountains. I mean, the same thing. I just recently, but these are analogies, and I'm saying it for a reason. I recently went to Yosemite. I had no right thinking I should do this hike up the mist trail, what's going on with my body. But I just felt I wanted to give it a try, that I wanted to do it, if at all possible, one more time in this life. And this was the year, right? This is the Yosemite year, all this water, and this hike takes you up along the waterfalls. But it was hard. It's a very hard hike, the mist trail, and I knew it would be hard. And I kept saying to myself, quit looking up, except to stop and take in the magnificence of the view. But quit looking up, thinking, oh my God, oh my God. Be in the moment. Enjoy the moment. And I think on the path, we really need to do the same thing. The mind that's asking that question can't imagine the goal. It doesn't have the ability. We can't learn what spiritual freedom is, what pure, absolute joy is, what that experience was that Master has, that he described so beautifully in the autobiography that I quote all the time. I realized the center of the Empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my own heart, sitting right in the middle and seeing and experiencing the entire spirit world. We can't do that. So we may as well be in each moment constantly turning towards God, turn towards God, do it again, be kind, be compassionate, uplift your heart, remember to pray, remember to keep holding God's hand right with you in everything you're doing. Whether it's a hike, do it with Master. I don't know how many times that day I said Om Guru, because I was never sure I was going to make it. It was very hard. I wouldn't have made it if Lakshmi wasn't there with me, because there were a few times, I don't know how many, where I looked at that next step. There was no way this knee was going to do it. No way it was not pulling these 120 some pounds with it. So I got a little help from my friends, but it was a lot of Om guruing. And I think that's the answer. I mean, I know you know this. So, I mean, you said it, really. And so I feel I can appreciate somebody wanting to know, am I doing it? Am I on the right path? Help me, guide me. Is this it? Is this it? And have I made progress? You know, every once in a while I look at this extraordinary life, this life with Master, with Swamiji, of opportunity, of all that I've learned, all that I've heard, all that I've felt, all that I've been given to do. And I think, wow, I think I really moved through a lot of karma and lifetimes through God's grace, only through God's grace in a life. Like, this is a good incarnation. So I say that this is being a great incarnation, but I never know, I never forget that there's a ways to travel here, so I gotta just stay. I don't even know if I spoke to what you were talking about. I hope I did.
I have more. Due to deeper meditation, the negative qualities within me are more obvious to me. Seeing these qualities bothers me and leads to conflict within. What can I do to accept these qualities and find a sense of inner peace while working through them?
These are all very good questions. That's a very good question for somebody who's consciously and thoughtfully wanting to grow spiritually. You know, let me say this because I wanted to say this also to whoever asked the question about the Matthew reading. We did a course here now a couple of years ago during the pandemic called what was the name of the emotional healing class? Secrets of course. Secrets of Emotional Healing. It was a book study. It went on for a year based on Swami Kriyananda's book of the same title, Secrets of Emotional Healing. So you could, and he wrote like 25, I think, secrets books. It might have been 26 or 7, but it was like that. Each day of the month, he wrote a quote-unquote secret. It was really a spiritual, what's the word? Gem, you know, that we could contemplate probably for the rest of this life, each day. But he wrote one for each month. And they were hugely successful books at that time, more successful than some of these other amazing books he was writing, because it's in bite-sized pieces. I think people could just take it. Also, they were adorable. I have to say they're not being published like that anymore. But having said all that, I would like to say that in terms of really finding some great solutions to this question that you're asking, that course was really rather extraordinary. I think all of us who were there for it felt that way. I felt like Swamiji himself in many of the classes just came and taught it, because he gives 2 lines, sometimes 3, but rarely, about secrets of dealing with depression, anxiety, fear, restlessness, lack of self-worth. He just so many emotions and feelings, and he lifts it right up by the highest spiritual thread. If you go to the AnandaPaloAlto.org website, I think you can find it. If not, you can write to Lakshmi. Lakshmi at anandapaloalto.org, and she'll send you a link to the class. It's one of those courses that's on that will be there forever. It's really worth listening to the answers, to the explanation or expounding on, I would say, of each secret. It was really something, and I think it would help in this. Now, can you read me the question again? Oh, I remember. The person was saying, now that I'm going deeper in meditation, it's also uncovering some, I think you call them negative qualities in myself, and it's pulling me down, you were saying. So the first thing I want to say is stop it. Of course, I know that's not easy, but I do want to say it. You know, these human tendencies that are very strong, and I want to say this out loud, yet I feel very with you in terms of how hard this is. But all of the time, and this is what that course talks about, this is why I'm saying find the course, because in 30 talks that are just 30 minutes, usually 40 minutes sometimes, so you just can listen to them over time, whatever it is you're feeling about yourself, it will be addressed in a deep way. And let me just say, I'm sorry, but because you're all listening, I would suggest just listening to the talk. You know, the whole evening was recorded, and I'd like to ask somebody at some point to find the time to just take the talks out, and we'll put them up just as the talks. The videos are not good for many reasons. It was the beginning of the pandemic. Our now very professional videographers, we just didn't know. I didn't pay attention to what I was wearing. We didn't care what was behind me. It's distracting in a way. I've been watching them again for many reasons, because I'm writing a bigger book to explain even more of that whole class. So I'm watching them. But you can also just listen to the talks. And if the prayer and the meditation and the chanting is on there, you could fast forward to the talks and then just listen, so it's less time consuming for you, but deep, very deep. All of the time that we as human beings spend feeling guilty, disliking a quality in ourselves, being ashamed, which I've often said, I think shame is the hardest human emotion to deal with. It just makes one feel so unworthy. It's very, very challenging. But I'm speaking to all of those, whatever we come to, and then we spend time with it. It is a huge, huge waste, like a sinkhole for energy. It never serves us in any positive way to negatively review some of those things about ourselves that are true. It's not that the thing's not true. It's not that I've never misbehaved. Believe me, I have misbehaved and badly and hurt people so many times in this life, never mind past lives, and we're carrying all of that. Master says we don't remember our past lives because we couldn't bear it to look at some of who we were and what we've done. He says that. And I think, boy, this one lifetime isn't enough. Learning how to use that energy, literally, to transform it from it's what it is to its absolute opposite. We are dualistic by nature. That's the nature of the human condition. We come in and we go out right away, instantly. We start crying for warmth, comfort, food, love, everything outside of ourselves, until we forget that all of what we need we already have inside of ourselves. And then we spend all of these lifetimes remembering it. We go out, we look 180 degrees in the wrong direction. Somebody tries to tell us to come back in, means to feel love, to connect with God, to meditate. We revolt. I mean, it's just, we go on this journey. That's what we do. Okay, we're on it. Yay, we're on it. Let's head back in the right direction. When those thoughts come, the only thing to do, as soon as you can, the instant you notice it, no, out. It's Satan, it's the devil. Pick up instantly, carry with us a book, Whispers from Eternity, or Affirmations for Self-Healing, or our phones with a chant on it, and instantly do not let your mind, which will want to play with it a little bit. We like that. We dabble in it. We try things on. We have conversations with people before we see them. We create the argument, whether it's with somebody else. How many times? Don't raise your hands. Everybody in this room has gone into an argument with somebody, figuring out what they're going to say that that person will now understand why I'm right. We do that. We all do it. I mean, in the term mental masturbation, which I was wondering for a minute if I should say out loud, but you know, it's like that. It's like that. Just you can't put something down. We do that, and that is so bad for us. It just takes us further and further. That is what we mean when we say, do we go towards the dark, or do we look to the light? How do we solve our problems? This problem. You know, this is one of the niyamas. I mean, Patanjali talked about how to creatively, to expand spiritually through introspection, through self-study, through noticing who we are, because we cannot move forward if we don't know where we are. If we're in denial and getting angry about it and spending all of that energy trying to prove to ourselves and everybody else we've never made a mistake, we're not competitive, we're not defensive, we're not greedy, we're not whatever our own particular brand of it is, we're wasting our energy. That's just another few lives. Few may mean thousands or millions, you know? We all have it. I mean, look at Judas. You know, look at Judas, one of the 12 disciples. He had a thing with money. He was greedy. He had to learn the lesson. So he wasn't going to learn it by denying it. He knew it. I mean, he killed himself. That was one way out, probably not the best way, but I'm saying we all have these things. I mean, and Judas is a good example because, dear Lord, he actually sent God himself into that crucifixion. Imagine. I can hardly read the story anymore. It just is so unsettling for me. But it's unsettling because whatever I've done, similar kinds of things. But just saying that I perseverate with it, which is what the mind does, probably a better word than the phrase I used before, which I'll not repeat again because I'm going to probably ask Lakshmi to take it out of there. But we perseverate. We go over it and over it and over it. Look what I did. Why did I do that? I'm awful. But they. No, not they. I'm terrible. I'm a bad human being. No, we're not. Souls can't be bad. Souls are pure, divine energy. It's Satan that has us think about something in a different way. Yogananda said, situations are neither good nor bad. It's the mindset that has us believe that. So we have to change our mind. That is the whole of the spiritual path, by the way, so it's challenging. Very. but there's nothing else to do. Stop yourself. It's not because you're meditating more deeply that's showing you those things. It's because when we start sitting quietly without distractions, we begin to notice who we are. It's okay, that's good. That's not bad. What we do with it, you know, the physical law of the universe, I quote this all the time, it's always relevant. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can always be transformed. Always. That's a physical law. All energy can be transformed. If you're feeling anger, it can be transformed into calmness. If you're feeling hate, it can be transformed into love in places and ways you wouldn't believe. Master's Peace and Harmony prayer is great for this. You take a person that you're angry with or that you've sent hate towards or you've stolen from them or any of the other things we can do. And you say this peace and harmony, Lord, fill that person, whoever it is, with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. You say it 10 times. Lord, fill James with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Doesn't need to be because you've done something wrong. It's a way of praying for that person too. And then 3 times you say, fill me. Lord, Lord, fill me with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Doesn't take long. 10 times, eyes closed, awareness and attention at the point between the eyebrows from the heart to the spiritual eye. Fill James with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill James. This came from Master. I have heard amazing stories. I'll never forget, somebody came to me once, they had started a new job. They came and they said, Shanti, I hate to even say this word to you, but I hate my boss. I hate my boss. They kept saying it. I hate my boss, like an affirmation. No, no, no. I said, okay, I hear you're having a little trouble with your boss. I said, let's try the peace and harmony prayer. Must have been one of those times when Ananda, who was very into the peace and harmony prayer, she always used to talk about it. I almost never do, but she did a lot. I said, try this peace and harmony prayer. This is one of many true stories. And that person came back to me a month later and said, I can hardly believe it. I really like that person. How is it? I know I was telling you otherwise, but she's great. It's transforming. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can always be transformed. We never have to stay where we are. Never. We're a little attached to it. That's the problem. The attachment is the problem, not the fact that it can be changed. So don't let yourself wallow there, and only you can make that instantaneous decision. I'm telling you, the minute you start to let the thoughts percolate, you're lost. You lost the opportunity for spiritual freedom in that moment. So take every opportunity that you can. I know it's hard. And don't stay there. Look to the light. And it will change. And soon those things will not be coming up. And again, I highly recommend the Secrets of Emotional Healing course. I think we have time for maybe one more. Let's see.
I've heard that we need to be centered in the spine. Can you please share some tips on how we practice this in daily life?
Well, obviously, Kriya Yoga is the first answer. I know maybe the question is asking as if there's a difference out there in life, but let me answer it. You know, this is the essence of what the path of Kriya is. This is why, this is one of 2 or 3 main reasons that Master incarnated. was to get Kriya Yoga and bring it to us to show us how to get and stay in the spine. And I will tell you, it works if you work it. It's perfect. There is no, who was it, Ananda or one of the other saints who said, it's the highest and best way ever given to mankind, who through self-effort can find their way to God. Kriya is powerful. Imagine that an avatar took on a life to get initiated and to come to the West to share it with us. Just sit with that for a minute. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's mind-boggling, is what it is. But he did. It's the truth. And we all know the whole story. But you follow that story from Babaji to Lahiri and that palace. And Sri Yukteswar is sent to Lahiri, and Master sent to Sri Yukteswar. Sri Yukteswar sets out to find him and says to him in very short order, you're going to the West. And Master gets on a boat, not speaking a word of English. I mean, the story's remarkable, but it's written down. It's not like it's prehistoric times where we're trying to interpret something on cave walls, right? It's in English words we know. This is what happened. It's what the autobiography tells us. I came here to teach you Kriya Yoga, which will take you right into your spine. Kriya Yoga is all about getting from the Irda and the Pingala, where emotions and duality and conflict exist, into the Sushumna, where peace and joy and harmony and love and calmness exist. And to take that beautiful energy and work our way up, clearing the chakras, ridding ourselves of those vrittis, because it's all energy that's being transformed. That's what it is. So we release the energy from this kundalini, and the chakras open like this, and they like feed each other and remind each other what their job is until there's no energetic obstruction to freedom. So Kriya Yoga and the practice of it, we have to do it, it works if you work it, is it. And what we find is that we're not just practicing Kriya when we're sitting in the morning. We've opened those channels. We're in the process of opening them. And everything we do in life, everything, more and more and more, becomes informed by our practice of Kriya. So, and that self-awareness is a part of this when looked at correctly. So we begin to know ourselves through the practice of Kriya, but we know our true self, our self with a capital S, not this little egoic self. It's a big journey from here to here, big journey, but we're on the journey, we're headed in the right direction. And when we walk into a store, you know, I went into a store the other night to pick up dinner that I had ordered. For a lot of reasons, I didn't want to have it delivered, but I also didn't want to cook. So I was waiting for this food. And in walks, and there's my food sitting there, hot. And in walks a friend of the woman who's ringing me up. And he goes, hey, girl, what's happening? And then they're off and running. And I'm looking at my watch, and 3 minutes go by at 5, and I'm standing there. And she has my food. She was about to ring it up, and her friend came in. Then they're talking about where they're going to party that night and the people who were. And finally I said, excuse me, I'm sorry. This is fun. I know it's fun. I know you're having fun. Could you ring up my dinner and then have more fun? And I know that before, some other time, I would have felt so much aggravation. I would have been saying to myself, because I said it, if these people work for me, they'd be gone in a minute. Why isn't anybody teaching them, blah, 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 blah. How do you run a business? How do people grow up? Why aren't they more mature? And where did that ever get me? Or them? But, you know, she turned and she goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry, of course. You know, maybe a little realization. Hello, this is a customer-based, you're doing a service here. It doesn't matter whether I'm visiting my brother and his family who are, you know, whoever they are. I mean, it's just every single thing we do with each other, how we run our businesses, how we communicate, everything becomes informed by Kriya. And we all know, we're all friends here. Let's be honest. You know that I'm different now than I was 5 years ago or 8 years ago. I mean, it's the truth. I'm nicer. I mean, it's just the truth. People tell me all the time, I hope I'm not insulting you, but you're really different. And I say, thank God. Thank God. What else are we doing, really? So it is honestly the answer is to just practice knowing that Kriya is our life. It's not separate from life. And the more we practice and the more our heart opens, the less we're able to still react the way we reacted maybe even just 2 days ago, or respond the way we start changing. And it's lovely. It's all of the affirmation that we need that we're making spiritual progress, actually, is what it is. So, yeah. Kriya Yoga resides in our spine. It's the energy in our spine. We cannot leave it at our altar in the morning or in the evening. It goes with us. We should remember that. You know, it's also very good practice. We talk about this a lot. When we teach people to meditate, we teach them to sit up straight, spine straight. We do all of this for a reason. And I used to teach people, roll your shoulders like this and then stop when they're back. What happens to the heart? We say this a lot. Watch any video of Swamiji. He entered a room heart first all the time. That's what you felt about him. If we remember to do these little things, I'm headed out into the world. I'll go heart first today. We're not talking about the human heart and the emotions, right? We're talking about the Kriya Yoga aspect of devotion. So it's a practice, all of this, but again, moment by moment by moment, we get better at it. So, you know, it's a quarter of, I'm feeling, are there more questions? How do you all feel? It's been a long morning, I think, huh? Why don't we just end now? It's been a great morning. You see what I meant about these questions, just the whole of the path. This, I have to say, these are some of my favorite mornings. So I hope it's been good for everyone, those of you online, those of you here. You know, that the masters have managed to come through in a way that's helpful for all of us. So bless you all. And yeah, there is an open house at the farm this afternoon. Anybody cares to go? It's a little bit of our outreach. A lot of Ananda energy helps out there. And